Hey guys, are you looking for a tank build that's capable of hard mode content and is fun to use? Then this build might be for you. What is this build? This build is a necro tank and it has some subclassing aspects that I will get into, but this build is capable of doing veteran trials as well as hard mode dungeons and trifectas. So let's get right into it. Alright, so first things first, let's get into the attributes. So as you can see here, we have 11 points into Magicka, we have 30 into health, and 23 into stamina. We are using the Atronach Mundus Stone, and if we look at our stats, we're sitting at just under 22k max mag, we have 40k maximum health, and we have 29k max stam, so a lot of stam here. Now, our recoveries, we have 1000 health recovery, which is just okay. Like, it doesn't matter too much in my opinion, but nice to have. We have 1377 mag recovery with 762 stam recovery. Now, let me just quickly buff up. And as you can see, we're sitting at just under 31k resistances. This is not cap, however, so if you want to cap out your resistances at 33k, I would 100% recommend it. However, I am comfortable tanking anything just under 31, and that's personal preference. However, for newer players especially, I would highly recommend getting that up to 33. Next, let's go on to food and potions. So first things first, we're using tri-stat potions. These are pretty much what you see standard on any tank build nowadays. They give you recovery of every single type, so mag, stam, and health recovery. And they give you resources when you pop them, so they're giving you a heal, they're giving you max resources back, so they're just good to have. Now, onto the food, there is a few things to talk about here. So, personally, I am using Sugar Skulls. This gives you max resources, health, stam, and mag, and it gives you a line of health recovery, which is also nice. It's just extra health being built back up from your passive healing, so that's always nice to have. Now, if you want a cheap alternative, you can use Longfin, and this doesn't have the health recovery side of things, but you still get the max resources, however it is slightly less. And there's one other thing I do want to mention, and that is this build that I'm going over, I use max stat food because that's what I personally like. However, one recommendation that I would say, unfortunately I don't have it on me, is Jewels of Misrule. This is a sustain food, and if you're comfortable with using that instead, I would highly recommend using Jewels of Misrule. This build is not set in stone when it comes to stats and stuff. You can mess around with it, so just do what is best for you. Next, I'm going to talk about the gear that we're using. So, first things first, we're using Master's Sword and Shield on the front bar. Well, one hand and shield, let me specify. You can use any one hand from this set. So, with this, you are getting healed every single time that you use Puncher. What is Puncher? Puncher is a taunt skill from the Sword and Board line, and we will be using that. So, we are getting healed every time that we're using it. And as I said earlier, there is stuff in the gear that affects our resistances, and this. This gives us physical and spell resistance equal to the amount that we heal or overheal for 5 seconds. So every time we use Puncher, we not only get heal, but we also get a resistance buff, and this will take us over cap. So just keep that in mind. Now, for enchantment on the weapon, you can actually go with a lot of different things. Usually, I will say use an Exorb Stam or an Exorb Mag, something like that. It gives you extra sustain. I have Flame on it just in case I ever decide to put on Encratis. It's an extra proc chance from the Flame Glyph. However, I would recommend just an Exorb enchant here. It's just good to have. We're using Decisive. Now, the reason we're using decisive is obviously we want to get our ult quicker, so that's why I'm using that. And Necro is great at gaining ult quickly, so that's why we're using this. And onto the shield, we're using reinforce with Tristat, and this just gives us extra resistance as well as those stats. Now, moving on to our first 5-piece set, we're using Drake's Rush on the back bar. Now, what Drake's Rush does is whenever you bash an enemy, you, as well as 3 group members within 15 meters of you, gain major heroism for 12 seconds, which gives you free ultimate every 1.5 seconds. And this can occur once every 18 seconds. So every 18 seconds, you want to switch to your back bar and you want to bash the enemy, whether that's a boss or an ad pool, like whichever one, and it's going to give your whole group major heroism, which means you're gaining passive ult every 1.5 seconds, which is just really nice. Now, we have a Crusher enchant, which is pretty standard, which reduces the resistances of the target hit. One thing to keep in mind, as it does not say in the tooltip of this, it is only one target. So if there's an ad pool, it's not going to apply Crusher to every single target in that ad pool. It's only one that it ticks on. So just keep that in mind. And we have that in Infuse just to increase the effectiveness and cooldown of enchant. So the Crusher will proc more often. Now, moving on, we are actually using Bloodsworn. This is a ulti regen set, and we're using One Piece Medium and One Piece Heavy for Undaunted passives. Now, what Bloodspawn does is whenever you take damage, you have a 6% chance to generate 18 ultimate and increase your physical and spell resistance for 5 seconds. So, yet again, another way that we're getting extra resources in terms of ultimate, as well as giving us some resistances. So, 6% chance isn't much, but you're going to get hit all the time. So this actually procs a lot more often than you'd think. And we have it in medium for the head, and we have it in sturdy with max resources across the board. So Tristat. And for the shoulder, we're using sturdy again with Tristat, and this is in heavy this time. So we have the One Piece medium for extra sustain. Now, onto the body set that we're using. So this will be our 5-piece body, and that's going to be Turning Tide. So Turning Tide is acquired in dungeons, and what it does is when you block an attack, you get a buff. And this buff lasts for 10 seconds, and it's on your character. And what you want to do is when you have this buff, you want to bash. When you bash, it will send out a wave, which basically applies minor vulnerability for 10 seconds in an AoE. And this can occur once every 15 seconds, so it does have a 5-second cooldown. However, this is an AoE major vulnerability for the group, which is nice for ad pools, nice for the boss, and this is just a great option. So this will be on our body, which means it is available on both bars when you block, so just keep that in mind, it isn't specific. The one thing I do like to do with this set is if I've blocked and I have that buff that I can use on a bash, I can then switch to my back bar if Drake's Rush is also active, and I can proc Drake's Rush as well as Turning Tide in one bash, which just means you're not bashing multiple times and using resources. However, obviously this doesn't always line up, so just keep that in mind. So the chest piece, we have a Tristat glyph with Reinforce just to give extra resistances. Onto the waist, we're using Sturdy with Max Stam. We have, yet again, Sturdy with Max Stam on the hands. On the legs, we have Tristats with Sturdy. And finally, another Max Stam with Sturdy. So we are reducing our block cost with quite a lot of our pieces, which just means our block doesn't cost as much, and we have 29k stamina, which means we can sit and block for a long time without ever having to worry about it draining our max stam, because we have so much. So that's why I use this setup. However, the one thing I will recommend as well is you can actually go for more reinforced pieces, as I said earlier, to get your resistances up, and you can swap out some of these pieces for divine as well if you want to buff up the Mundus stone so you get more recovery. So just keep that in mind. So for the jewelry, we're using Drake's Rush to finish off the 5-piece set on the back bar. And personally, I will say when it comes to enchants, it's kind of up to preference. as well as some of the things that we're using as well on this. Like, I have one piece infused with two piece harmony. If you want to go full infused, go full infused. Personally, I just like using harmony for that extra sustain boost whenever I take a synergy. And I've got two magical recovery glyphs, and then I have one which is a reduced spell cost, which basically reduces the cost of our magical abilities. And this is an infused to get that up. So that is what I'm personally using. As I say, you can mess around with this. If you want to go triple infuse, go triple infuse. If you want to have more cost reductions, you can have more cost reductions. If you want more recovery, get more recovery. This is up to you. Mess around with it, see what works for you. Alright, so on to the skills. So first things first, we are subclassed, however we're only taking one line. So we stick with Bone Tyrant and we stick with Live and Death and we pick up Siphoning as our last one. So this is what I'm using for subclassing. Now onto our front bar skills, we're using Summoner's Armor. Now Summoner's Armor is our resistance buff, and another thing with this is when this is active, it reduces the cost of Blast Bones, Skeletal Mage, and Spirit Mender. Now, Blast Bones and Skeletal Mage don't matter here, but that Spirit Mender we will be using on our back bar, so that is reducing the cost of that. And also, if this is used up, aka whether it runs out or if you proc it early, as this does have a 30-second duration, and if you use it after 10 seconds, it will actually generate a corpse, which will come in handy later, and I will show you why. Now, onto our self heal, we're using Hungry Scythe. This is our self heal, and the one thing to keep in mind in this, the more enemies in front of you, the better the heal. So just keep this in mind, and it does give you a heal over time, so that's another thing to just keep in mind as well. So this is our self heal. Moving on, we have Pierce Armor, aka Puncher. This is our staple taunt on our front bar, and this reduces the enemy's resistance by applying minor and major breach. So keep that in mind. You want this on the boss, you want this on any big ads in ad pool or even smaller ads, but prioritize the big ads first, obviously, when you're taunting. So just keep that in mind for ad pools. Now, we are using Siphoning attack, and this is a huge recovery like gain. I was originally before subclassing using balance, however I've swapped it out for siphoning, and what siphoning does is while it's slotted on either bar, all damage heals you and restores magicka and stamina every 1 second. Now, another thing to keep in mind is this can actually be used as well. So if you use it, it will actually take health away and give you magicka and stamina. So if you're in a moment where you're just getting absolutely wiped out sustain wise, or you can't get synergy from the healer because they're down, something like that, you can use this and it will drain your health but give you resources back. So that is an option, but obviously keep in mind this will do damage to you, but this is great for sustain. Now, onto our last skill, we are using Lingering Flare, which is just here passively. So ignore this skill, you don't want to be using this at all. However, it is there for the passive, which is while slotted, you gain major protection, reducing your damage taken by 10%, which is absolutely huge. It will just sit here and just means you're taking less damage. Now, for the ult, we are using Renewing Animation. What this is if people are dead and you have this, you put this AoE on them and it will revive them instantly. I can't tell you how clutch this is, especially in dungeons, because as you can see, it can resurrect up to 3 of them, and you restore magic and stamina each time you hit someone with this. So this is huge for sustain if you can proc this on people, and the fact that it can heal 3 people means if you're in a boss and your healer and your 2 DDs go down, you can res all 3 of them at once, which is just insane. Now, on to the second thing. I'm just going to talk about this first because, as you can see, I do not have the Morphle Warhorn. This is because originally, before subclassing, I was using Colossus with Saxil, and I don't have that now, so I've changed to Warhorn. However, I haven't got the chance to level it up. But this will turn into aggressive Warhorn. Make sure you take that morph. Now, you can't see here. However, what Warhorn will do is it gives you max resources and it will do the same buff as Saxil. So just to show you, we would be getting the same buff as Saxil, which gives you major force, and this increases critical damage by 20%. So that is what the aggressive Warhorn does. It gives you max resources and it also gives you major force to your group, and that can proc on a whole group. So if you're in a raid, like a trial, you can proc that on everyone in the group. So just keep that in mind, but that is aggressive Warhorn. That is the morph that you want. Alright, so next is in a range. This is your range taunt, and obviously it has a synergy as well, which does passive damage from someone activating the synergy. However, the main reason we're using this is for the taunt, and this will taunt enemies for 15 seconds, and it has a range of 28 meters. You can use the Ice Staff taunt, however, that has less range, and it also immobilizes, which can be a bit funky. So personally, I prefer it in a range. However, there is other options here. So yeah, that's our range taunt. Now onto our next. This is our only scribing skill that we have, and this is our pull. So what this does is it pulls in an enemy that you hit, and they'll basically be flung to you, and that's really good because it allows you to control the ad pulls and bring everything close together. What we're using is obviously pull, and we're using restore, stam, and mag, so we're actually getting some of the cost back from using this, as well as actually getting some stam back, which is just nice. And then we're using Major Cowardice, which reduces the enemy's weapon and spell damage, aka reduces their damage that they're going to be doing, and that will last for 10 seconds. So that is our pull. As I say, you can use Silver Leash if you do not have this. Now, next we have Spirit Guardian, and this is a really, really nice skill. It gives you passive healing, it lasts for 16 seconds, and it will heal you every 2. It doesn't heal a huge amount, however, you can notice it, especially alongside with Scythe, so that's why we're using it. As well as the major part of this, when this is active, you get 10% of the damage is transferred to it. So, for example, let's say you take 100k damage hit. I know there's not really much that's going to hit you for that, but let's just use this as a baseline. If you take 100k damage, 10%, aka 10,000 of that will transfer to this, which means you'd only take 90k rather than 100k. So, yeah, just keep that in mind. It's really nice. It means whenever you take damage, you're taking less overall. Now, onto the next skill, we're using Blockade of Frost. This is the Ice Staff skill from Destruction, and what this is doing is it is how we proc our Crusher enchant, as well as the fact that it does frost damage, which can give us shield, which applies minor breach as well, and also has a nice snare there. So that's why we have this. So you want to keep this up at all times for your Crusher enchant, and it's just nice to have. Now, onto the last skill, we are using Necrotic Potency. So what this is if there is a dead enemy or a corpse, which can actually be generated from Summoner's Armor, or even allies that are dead on the floor, you can use this and it will basically give you ultimate and health for each corpse that you consume off of the floor. And another thing to keep in mind, while this is slotted, your damage taken is reduced by 3%, so yet again, you're going to be taking less damage. So this is huge, you're getting a bunch of ult, you combo that with Drake's Rush as well as Bloodspawn, and you've got so much ult coming in that you're going to be able to use your Warhorn like so often, and like it's just really, really nice to keep up your ult a lot quicker. Let's get onto the passives. So I won't go over these in too much detail, however, I will go over the main ones. So first things first, in Bone Tyrant we're taking all of them. So the first one is Death Gleaning. This is huge, it's for sustain, and whenever an enemy dies within 28 meters, you are restoring magicka and stamina, so this is absolutely huge. Just keep in mind, you will need a Bone Tyrant ability slotted for this to work, which is fine because you will have this on both bars. Next one is Disdain Harm, which reduces the damage over time effects by 15% while you have Bone Tyrant ability active, which is absolutely huge and is a staple of the Necro, so this one is 100% something you should pick up. Next is this one, which is going to increase your healing received for each Bone Tyrant ability, which is just passive extra healing. Next, Last Grasp is going to give you max health, so that's nice. Next, we're going on to Live and Death, and yet again, we're taking all of them here. And the first one is while you have a negative effect, your healing done is increased. So if you have a negative effect on you, your heals are going to be stronger. Next is Near Death Experience, which isn't that important, but when you have a Live and Death ability slotted, your critical strike is increased with all healing abilities by 12% in proportion to the severity. So basically, the more damage you've taken, the more that's going to be. So just keep that in mind. So corpse consumption, whenever you consume a corpse, you generate 10 ultimate, and this can happen every 16 seconds. It's just extra passive ult, so this is huge. And then the last one is whenever you have your spirit mender, in this case, active, you get extra recoveries of each type. So that's just nice, more sustain. On to siphoning. Yet again, we're taking all of them, and the main reason we're using this is not only obviously for siphoning attacks, which is really nice for sustain, but it's actually for catalyst. So whenever I drink a potion, you're getting 22 ult, which is a huge chunk, and this is just one of the main reasons we're using this, because we're getting our ulti so quick on this build. Next is Magical Flood, which increases our max mag and stam by 6%, which yet again is just nice. However, keep in mind this will only be on our front bar due to us not having a skill on the back bar that can cater for this. Next is this one, which is increasing your healing done by 3% for each siphoning ability slotted. Remember, this will only be on the front bar as well, so just keep that in mind. And finally, transfer, which is whenever you cast a siphoning ability while in combat, you generate 2 ultimate. This effect can occur once every 4 seconds. So just keep in mind, whenever you're using siphoning attacks, which won't be all the time because obviously it does damage to you, you will generate ult every 4 seconds. So you're going to get more passive income of ultimate just from using the skill every now and again. One-handed shield, and we're going to be taking all of these. So first things first is Fortress, and this is reducing the cost of block as well as reducing the cost of our one-handed shield abilities, so that's just nice. Next, this is reducing the damage that we take, as we are getting a 20% buff to the amount of damage that we can block, so this is huge, as well as extra weapon and spell damage. Next is Deadly Bash, and the main reason we're taking this is because it reduces the cost, so just keep that in mind. Next is Deflect Bolts, which basically increases the amount we can block from projectiles and range attacks, which is just nice to have. Next is Battlefield Mobility, which basically, whenever we're blocking, it is making it so we are going to be moving a bit quicker. We have the Destro passives, and we are taking all of them. Trifocus is one that you can take off depending on preference, because what this is doing is on your ice staff, aka your back bar, you're going to be blocking with magicka instead of stamina. Some people I know don't like this, so you can take this off if that is what you want to do. On to the next one. This basically makes it so our Destro staff abilities ignore some resistance. It's just nice to have passive, so just take it. The next one is Elemental Force, which increases the chance to apply a status effect by 100%, which is basically going to mean that you're going to be applying brittle and stuff like that a lot more often with your Destro staff. Next, we have Ancient Knowledge, and this is a really important one, and what it does is when you're using Ice Staff, it reduces the cost of block as well as increases the amount you can block by 20%. And then finally, we have Destruction Expert, which is kind of just here for the sake of it, but it does give you resources whenever you kill an enemy with a Destro stuff ability, which is rare, but it can happen. But the main reason you have it is obviously it's giving you some sustain for when your destruction staff shield from your ice staff, which is specifically from heavy attack, by the way, or your actual skill. It just gives you some resources, so that's just nice to have. Moving on, and we are taking these out of the medium passives. This is just for some extra sustain. I'm not going to go into too much detail, however, I will just hover over these so you can see. But yeah, this is mainly for sustain. On to the next, and yet again, this is not something I'm going to go over, but this will basically increase our resistances and reduce the damage that we're taking, stuff like that. So I will just hover over these just so you can see. But as I say, I'm not going to go into full detail with these. Next, we have Undaunted, and these are really nice to have. The first one is whenever we use a synergy, we're getting more max stats back, which is just nice. And then the second one, we are getting some extra stats just for having different weights of armor. So we have that one piece medium, so we are getting 4% rather than 2. However, if you do go with full heavy, this will still be at 2%. And then moving on, Assault would just recommend picking up this just for use in general. It gives you Gallop, so yeah, but that isn't important for the actual build, but still just pick that one up if you want. And yeah, moving on, we are a Imperial, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but the reason that we've taken this is because obviously we get the max health, we get the max stam, but the main reason is it reduces the cost of all our abilities by 6%, which is absolutely huge for sustain. Talk about champion points. Now, I'm only going to go over a few things in the green tree, as quite a lot of them I don't see as that important. But there's three main ones that I would highly recommend taking every time, and the first one is Steed's Blessing. This will basically just give you 20% movement speed when you're out of combat. So between ad pulls, you're going 20% quicker. So what's not to like? Next, we have Liquid Efficiency. This is basically something that will proc at a 10% chance whenever you use a potion, and what it does is it basically makes it so when you pop a potion, it has a chance of just not using it whatsoever. So that's always nice to have. And finally, Rational, so you're getting an extra 30 minutes onto your food duration, so that's just nice to have. Now, on to the main bulk of these passives. Now, going on to this one, which is the blue tree, we are using Ironclad, which reduces damage from direct damage attacks by 3% per stage, which means you're getting 6% in total. Next, we have Enduring Resolve, which reduces damage over time by 3% per stage, so an extra 6%, which means in total with the Necro passive, we are getting 21% damage resistance, which means damage over times just don't really do too much. Next, we have Bulwark, which increases our resistances when we have a shield or a staff equipped, specifically a frost staff. So, yep, that's why we're using that. And then Duelist Rebuff, which reduces our damage from single target by 3% per stage. Now, the one that I will give an honorable mention is Unassailable, which reduces our damage from error effect by 3% per stage, which means 6% in total. You can swap out your Enduring Resolve if you're comfortable with just having the 15% anyway from the Necro, and that way you'll get some extra resistances from error effect. Personally, I like double stacking because it just means those dots, which you can get quite a lot of, which are pretty high damage, will just be doing less damage. So that's why I use that. Now, next, moving on to the red tree, and I'm using Brace and Anchor, which is giving me 20% block mitigation. Just bear in mind it does reduce your movement speed by 16%, so that is something that I would just keep in mind while using this. Next, I use Expert Evasion. I actually quite like using this on the tank because for this, I've dropped Boundless Vitality because I'm already at 40k health, so I don't feel the need to pick this up. But expert evasion, basically, I get a dodge roll for free. You're going to be dodging as a tank, and getting a free one every now and again is just nice. Another thing that I'm using is fortified as well as rejuvenation. These are my last two. These I will pick up on most tanks. And what rejuvenation does is just gives you flat sustain, and fortified giving you those extra resistances. Now I will just quickly show an honorable mention, which is going to be celerity, which will give you 10% movement speed once you have it up to 50 points. And this can help counter your reduction in movement speed from brace and anchor. So just keep that in mind. You can put that on instead of expert evasion if you want to be moving a bit quicker. Personally, I'm fine with the 16% reduction in speed, but you might want to switch up and use celerity until like you get used to it, or maybe you just like it in general. So just keep that in mind. That's something you can use. Yeah, guys, that is the build, and thank you so much for all the support recently. If you liked it, please drop a like. If you dislike it, drop a dislike, and feel free to subscribe. Anything's appreciated here, and I will see you in the next build video.